Hello everyone. In the previous video, I talked about the basics of the networking and different protocols like TCP and UDP. So in this video, we're going to write the code for it using C# console application. So I have my Visual Studio open, I choose console app, and I will create the project. So here we go. So to start, I will create the packet class. We can use this class to serialize and deserialize our data so it could be transferred over the network. So we want our packet to be disposable, and we're going to create a byte list and a byte array. These variables are going to contain our bytes that we want to transfer over the network. The reason I have created both a list and an array, it's because each of them have a specific functions and methods that can make our work easier. We could just use one byte array, but I've added a list to access its internal functions and avoid writing extra code. I'm also creating a read pose. When we are reading the data from the packet, we need to know how far in the byte array we have read. This integer is going to help us with that. So I'm going to create two constructors. One is going to be used when we're going to send the data, and the other one will be used for received data. Let's focus on the sending data first. When we want to send some data, first we're going to create a new packet using this constructor. Then we're going to write any type of data that we want into the buffer list. So for that, I have created some methods. For example, write bytes. It will take a byte array and it will add it to the buffer list. Or if we want to write an integer, basically if we want to send an integer over the network, we're going to use write int. So it will take the integer, convert it into a byte array, then add it to the list. The same thing for float, boolean, strings. So basically everything that we want to send over the network, first we're going to use the bit converter to convert it into a byte array. Then we're going to add it to this buffer list and create a single byte array to send over the network. And in the case of the string, as you can see, we are going to write the length of the string first, and then we're going to convert the string into a byte and add it to the buffer list. You could also create the same methods for other variable types like longs, shorts, doubles, or any other data type that you want. And after we have written all the bytes into our buffer list, then we can just simply use get byte array, and it will convert that buffer list to byte array, and then it's going to return the byte array for us, and we can just send it over the network. But now let's say we've received some byte array from the network and we want to read the data from it. Then we're going to create a constructor for that as well. So we're going to pass the byte array that we have received. It is going to put that values inside the buffer list and buffer array, set the read pose to 0. Then we can start reading from it. For example, if we want to read some bytes from it, we're going to create a function for it, read bytes, the length we want to read, and whether we should move the read pose or not. Or let's say we want to read an integer from this packet. We are going to use the bit converter to int32. We're going to pass the buffer array and read pose. It knows that it should read 4 bytes from the buffer array. So we could just pass the read pose, and then we're going to increase the read pose with 4 bytes. The same thing for, let's say, float. We're going to create a read float. It is also 4 bytes. And read boolean, which is 1 byte. And then let's also create the read string. So first we are going to use read int to get the length of the string. Then we're going to extract it from the byte array. And let's also implement the dispose method. So basically we're gonna clean up the packet when we are done. So this is basically how we can create a packet system to read the data and write the data. So now let's create the next class. I am going to create a server class and another one for, let's say, client. So we have a server class and a client class. So starting with the server, the first thing we need is a TCP listener and a UDP listener. Also, we create a boolean indicating if the server is running or not. So as the name suggests, TCP listener is going to listen for new TCP clients that are going to connect to this device. If you remember, we learned that the TCP is connection oriented, which means in order to send and receive data, first you need to establish a connection. So this TCP listener is going to start listening for any connection, and after the connection is established, we can start sending data. But the UDP listener is just the UDP client. You don't need to establish any sort of connection. We can just send the data without it. I'm also going to create a class here. Let's say TCP client state. So I'm going to assign a unique ID to each client. So we need a network stream to send the data using TCP. So each client that gets connected to the server, and when the TCP listener gets that incoming connection, we can create a network stream between the server and the client, and using this stream we can send and receive TCP data. So I'm going to create a byte array, name it buffer. So basically each time the clients send the data, we're going to temporarily place it inside this buffer until we process it. So basically when the TCP listener gets an incoming connection, it is going to pass you a TCP client. We can store it here to have a reference of that client. So for the UDP, as I mentioned, we don't need a connection. All we need is an IP endpoint. So basically this is an IP and port stored in this class, and we can use this endpoint to send UDP data. So let's create 3 more variables. I'm going to create a dictionary of int TCP client state to have a list of my clients. I'm going to create an integer to track the last client ID that have been assigned. Also, I'm going to need a lock on the client ID every time I change it to make sure it is thread safe. So the first thing we need is a start function. Every time we want to start the server, we're going to call this. We're going to pass a port, and it will start listening on that port for new TCP clients. So let's do it in a try catch. Also add a finally. If we have a exception, we're just going to print it. And at the end, finally, we're just going to say server shutting down. And we're just going to clean up all the resources. We're going to disconnect all the TCP clients and clear the UDP and TCP listener. So let's go to the actual connection. So first we are going to say TCP listener is new TCP listener. Basically it's going to start the TCP listener on the local device and the port that we have passed to it. And then we're just gonna start it. And now in order to accept clients, we need to say TCP listener begin accept TCP clients. So, but that needs a callback. Let's first create the callback on accept TCP client. So basically every time a new client connects, we're gonna call this function. So how we do that? We are going to say TCP listener begin accept TCP clients, and this is going to be the callback that we pass to it. So when a new TCP client connects, this method here is going to be called. So here let's say running is equals to true. Then we're going to say console write line server is running, press X to stop, T or U to send a message to all clients using TCP or UDP. And here while it is running, we are going to read key. If it is X, we set the running to false. If it is T, we send the TCP message, and if it's U, we are going to send the UDP message, which we implement later. So we also need to create 2 callbacks. One is going to be on received data with TCP, and the other one would be on received data with UDP. So this on received data with TCP is going to be implemented to each client that is going to get connected, but on received data with UDP, we could just implement it here since, as I mentioned, UDP does not need a connection and a specific target client. You just give it an endpoint and it is going to send it. So UDP listener is going to be a new UDP client on this port. So it might not be even a good fit to name it UDP listener. It's just a UDP client actually. And we're gonna call begin receive. So basically we're gonna tell the UDP client on this port every time you started receiving data, you call on receive data with UDP and pass the data to this function. So that's it for our start. Let me collapse that for now. So let's go to the on accept TCP client. When a new TCP client connects, let's place it in a try catch. So if it is object disposed exception, it is just a listener that is stopped. We don't need to do anything in that case. But if it's another type of error, we're just gonna print that in the console. So let's go to the processing new TCP client here. So the first thing we're gonna do, we're going to say TCP client equals to TCP listener and accept TCP client. If you remember here on the start, we said TCP listener begin accept TCP client, and we passed this method. Now we say end accept TCP client. So it means that we got the connection. Now here, this TCP client is the incoming client. So we're gonna do whatever we need to do with this client here. And at the end, we say TCP listener begin accept client again, and we pass the same function. So it will going to continue accepting new clients. So now that we have the client, we can get the stream of that client, the network stream of that client, to use it for sending and receiving data. We can assign an ID to this new client. So let's also get the endpoint and print a log using it, saying TCP client connected. That is its ID, and that is the IP and port. So we're going to create a TCP client state, the class that we've created up here. It's going to get the stream client, and we're going to initialize the buffer, and finally we're going to add it to our dictionary. Now to receive data from this client using TCP, we can say stream begin read. So we're going to pass the buffer that we've created. The offset is going to be 0, the buffer length, and we're going to pass a callback on received data with TCP. So basically every time this client sends a data to the server, this method is going to be called, and the data is going to be stored in the state buffer. We're also going to pass the state to know which client is actually sending this data. So that state is going to exist inside this result here when unreceived data with TCP is going to be passed. Here we can just get the state by casting the result into a TCP client state. Let's also do a try catch here. So when we receive this new data, let's first take care of the exceptions. If it is object disposed exception, we're just ignore it. If it is IO exception, we're gonna do something else. Here the same thing. First let's go and create a remove TCP client. So when we call this, it is going to remove it from the dictionary. And here on receive data with TCP, if it is IO exception, we are going to remove the TCP client, and we're just gonna print a log. And basically we're gonna do exactly the same thing here. We can just get rid of this, but I've separated them to know exactly what is the cause of this error. So it doesn't matter really. Let's go to the actual business here in the try. So we received new data with TCP. Now how we can process that? First we're gonna call the end read from the stream. It will give us the length of the bytes that we read. If it is greater than 0, then we have read something. Otherwise, if it is 0, it means that the client was disconnected. So we're gonna remove it from the client's list and close the connection and print a log. So here, let's say we actually have some data. So here we call end read, and if you remember when we called begin read, we passed state buffer to the begin read, which means it is going to put all the data inside this buffer. So we've initialized it with 4096 length of the array. So to make sure we get only those elements inside the buffer that actually is related to our data, here we're gonna define a byte array data, and the length of it is going to be the length of the bytes that we actually read. So for int I less than bytes that we have read, we're gonna get that data from the buffer, place it in the data, and then it's going to give us a byte array that actually is pure data we received. Now we can simply say using packet equals to new packet data, we're gonna pass the data and then do all the processing that we want here on the data. Then at the end, we are going to reinitialize the buffer. Basically, we're gonna create a new buffer and start the begin read again, passing the same method. So it will over and over receive the data from the client. So let's say we have assigned an ID to our packages. So first thing, we need to read the ID using packet read int. And let's say if the ID is 1, we should expect that our packet contain a string. So we're gonna say message packet read a string, and then we're gonna just print the string. So basically that's on receive data with TCP. So let's collapse that. Let's go to the receive data with UDP. Let's put it on a try catch. If it is object disposed exception, we're just gonna ignore it. And if it is other type of error, we're just gonna print the error. And if we're still running, we call begin receive again and pass receive data with UDP again to continue this loop of reading the data. So we could create a endpoint to capture the sender's information. So in order to extract the received data from the result, we can just say byte array received data, our UDP client end receive, and we pass this result here. Also, we can pass a reference of any endpoint. It's gonna fill it with the information of the sender. Then simply we can create a packet with our received data. At the end, begin receive, passing the same method, and it will keep this loop of receiving data using UDP. And just like the TCP here in the packet, we read the ID. If the ID was 1, then we know that we should expect a string. We get the string and print it. Also, I can create a loop here and check if there is any client with the input equals to null. And if it was the same client, we're going to assign this to that client. So basically we're going to store the UDP endpoint of that client. This is not very sophisticated. I mean, it could have been a better way, but for now, let's just do it like this. And the reason is because UDP is connectionless. In order to transfer data, we need to know the endpoint of that UDP client. So let's create a function, say send to all with TCP. We're just gonna create a message, let's say hello with TCP at this time, doesn't matter. So here we are going to send this string. So to send it, we're going to say using packet equals to new packet. We say packet write int 1 as the packet ID, and write a string, we're gonna write the message. Then data is going to be packet get bytes array. And then for each client, we are going to use client stream to write that data into the stream and send it to the client. So we can create a similar packet for UDP, send to all clients with UDP. So the same way, we're going to create a message, a packet, assign the ID and the message itself, then create a for loop and send it to any client with an endpoint. So send the data with UDP here in the start. We've created the console key for it to send to all with UDP, and here send to all with TCP when we are going to press T and U. So that's for our server. Let's go to the client. We need some variables. It's going to be a UDP client, just like the server side. We just need UDP client on both sides to send and receive data. But here we don't have a listener anymore. We have TCP client, and we also have the TCP stream, whether the client is running or not, and a receive buffer for temporarily store the received data. So we need a function to start the client on a certain IP and port. We need a callback function on received data with TCP, another callback for on received data with UDP. Let's also create two functions to test sending data with TCP and sending data with UDP. So let's start here. First, let's make a try catch. So basically we need a try catch for all of them. So I'm just gonna copy it, paste it for all of them. And for this, we're also going to add a finally, and inside that we're gonna dispose everything and close everything. If we have an error, we're gonna print that. So let's go to the actual connection. So here we're gonna set up the TCP client first. TCP client is going to be a new TCP client. Then we're gonna use connect to connect to this IPN port, and after that we get the stream of the connection, initialize the buffer, and we are going to use the stream begin read, passing the buffer. Basically we're gonna say when you received any data, put it inside this receive buffer. After you did that, call this on received data with TCP. And for the UDP, let's create a new UDP client. The same way, we're gonna connect it to this IPN port, and then we're gonna say begin receive. So basically we're gonna say when you received any data on this endpoint, just call on receive data with UDP, which we have it here, and pass the data to that method. Let's set the running to true, and while running is true, right line press T for TCP sending, U for UDP sending, or X to exit. So we're gonna get the key. If it is X, set running to false. U send the data with UDP. T send data with TCP, and that is for our start function. So I'm gonna collapse that. To receive data with TCP, let's catch some errors first. If it is IO exception, then we need to stop the connection because connection was lost. So this is also going to happen if the stream is closed. There is nothing we need to do here. And this is other types of errors, which we set the running to false. So here in the actual try, when we receive TCP data, just like the server side, we're going to end read of the stream to get the length of the bytes that we've read. Then if length of the bytes is greater than 0, then we have something, otherwise server is closed. And we're just gonna stop the client and just return. And at the end, if there was no error and everything was fine, we're gonna initialize the receive buffer again and start listening for new data again using a stream begin read, and pass the same method to continue this loop of reading data. Just like the server side, we're going to get the valid bytes from the receive buffer, and using them we're going to create a packet here. Using that data, we get the ID for it. If it is 1, we are just going to know it is going to contain a string and print that. So that's the receiving data with TCP. Let's go receive data with UDP. So we're gonna print the error here, and just like the server, we are going to use a UDP client end receive to get the received data. We also can pass a reference to an endpoint to get the sender information. Then we're going to use that received data to create a packet, read the ID, and print the message. And at the end, in order to continue this loop of reading data, we're going to call UDP client begin receive again and pass the same method again. So to send the data with TCP, we can simply just create a string, any message you want, a new packet, write the ID using write int, writing the string, writing the message, and get the bytes from the packet, and just using TCP stream, write the data, and that's it. And a similar thing to send data with UDP. We're going to create the message, create a packet for it, and just using UDP client send the byte array to the server. And finally, in order to finish this project, let's go to the program. Here I'm gonna define an IP and a port. I will say console clear, console write line start as S for server or C for client. So basically I will start listening for pressing a key. If it is S, I will start a server. If it is C, I will start a client. So here it is. If the key equals to S, I will create a new server start on that port. If it is C, I will create a new client and start it on this IP and port. And by the way, if you're using the older versions of the Visual Studio, you're probably going to have a method here called main. So this is the code that goes inside the main function. Let's test our project. I'm going to publish this inside a folder, drive D and build. So I'm gonna place it over there and publish. Now if I navigate there, let's run this one. So start as server or client. That's one instance. Here is another instance, and this is another one. I think 3 instances would be fine. So this is it. Let's use this one as server. I'm gonna press S here, and is going to server is running. Press X to stop, T or U to send message to all clients. So it's working so far. Here I press C. So as you can see here, client connected with ID 1. Let's connect this one as well. I'm gonna press C here. Here we go. The second client is connected as well. And here let's press T here. It is working. Pressing U, it is also working. The same thing here, T, U, it's working. And let's send a message from the server to the both clients. That is T, yep, both of them received it. And U, yep, everything works just fine. So basically this is how you create your networking system using C#. Of course, this still needs a lot of polishing and it's not very perfect. I just tried to show you the basics and how it works. So I'm also going to put the code in the video description if you're interested in downloading it. I hope that this video was useful for you, and please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching.